So if I may, what I propose to do is first direct your attention in the compendium to tab 13, which is the joint affidavit of Dr. Wilson and Mr. Barnes. Tab 13. Now, if I may, by way of introduction, and it's reflected in the affidavit materials provided to you, Dr. Thomas Wilson is an emeritus professor of economics at the University of Toronto. He's a senior advisor to the Policy and Economic Analysis program at the Rotman Institute for International Business at the University of Toronto. He's a research fellow at the C.D. Howe Institute and was a member of the Statistics Council, Statistics Canada, from 2005 to 2016. Our other expert, Mr. Barnes, David Barnes, is a principal of Barnes Management Group. Barnes Management Group provides consulting services to public and nonprofit organizations. Mr. Barnes has over 30 years of experience as a social worker, consultant, and facilitator focusing on child welfare and services to Indigenous communities. He was the lead author of the 2006 report entitled Northern Remoteness, Study and Analysis of Child Welfare Funding Models. I raise this as a starting point to say that the folks that NAN has been fortunate enough to hire are credible experts, and credible experts to the point that Canada agrees, that it is agreed that these individuals will continue to be retained by Nishnawbe Aski Nation, report to Nishnawbe Aski Nation, but, and I emphasize the but, these experts are being made available to this panel, are being made available to Canada and to the parties. While they may be experts with a reporting relationship to Nishnawbe Aski Nation, there will be complete transparency in their work. This is not a shell game. This is not a strategic litigation exercise. This will be a transparent exercise in which their expertise will help children. Period. And we make that pledge to the panel, and we have already made that pledge to Canada and the remaining parties. So when I talk about these experts and the work they do, we ask you to consider, and we have a consent order prepared for your consideration, we ask you to consider making the order that they do the work under your jurisdiction as a tribunal. It is imperative that the good work of the Caring Society and the AFN continue through the continuing jurisdiction of this tribunal. And so when we take you to the order, the intention of the exercise is not to, and I repeat, not to, remove the creation of a remoteness quotient and the implementation of a remoteness quotient from this panel. The expectation and intention is to continue the work under the jurisdiction of this panel, but to continue it in a collaborative way. Dealing with tab 13 and the actual affidavits, or joint affidavit of Dr. Wilson and Mr. Barnes, I'm at tab 13A. If you keep 13A in front of you, I'm going to ask you to at the same time turn up the remoteness quotient order plus attachment that you have been presented yesterday. I confirm that all of the parties were provided a copy of this document, and I say at the risk of exceeding what is my job, but I think from the point of view of NAN, transparency is paramount. Because this was a resolution, it was Nan's respectful submission to this panel that the first time that you should be apprised of the resolution, the parties would be in camera, so that we could be asked questions about it in an appropriate way, because it was a resolution. So I asked on behalf of Nan yesterday for an in-camera proceeding to simply present this to you, but requested your leave, and you gave it to me, to address this on the public record. And as a matter of transparency, I want to emphasize there are no secret deals between Nishnawbe Aski Nation and Canada, whether it's this or anything else. There has to be an element of transparency to the work we do. On the other hand, we are faced with obligations when resolutions are arrived at to follow procedure and protocol in terms of apprising the parties and you, the panel, so we did that. So we intend now to take you through this order and the affidavit that's at tab 13, hopefully in an expeditious way so we can cut to the chase. So what you see in in the order, and it's a document entitled Order Re Nan Motion Respecting a Remoteness Quotient. What you see is what we refer to as a draft order. It's an order contemplated to be signed by this tribunal. In other words, we're respectfully proposing it for your signature. And it makes the point again, we don't want a side deal. We want this to be under your jurisdiction as a panel. So we refer to the motion having been brought before you for the creation of a remoteness quotient. And we refer to an attachment that I'll get into in a minute, which is a terms of reference for a table. But I want to cut to the chase in terms of the order that Nishnawbe Aski Nation and Canada jointly offer for your endorsement. It's at page 2. Upon hearing the parties' oral submissions, and I'm now going through the subparagraphs of the order, this tribunal orders that INAC and NAN will work to develop and implement an immediate relief funding formula for the 3 First Nations Child and Family Services agencies that serve NAN communities, in accordance with the terms of reference attached to this order as Schedule A. Secondly, this tribunal further orders that INAC provide to NAN, within 30 days of this order, funding of $77,900 odd for Phase 1 as set out in the expert proposal provided by NAN to INAC in accordance with the terms of reference. This tribunal further orders that INAC will provide NAN with the available empirical data agreed upon by NAN and INAC for Phase 1 by April 15th. This tribunal further orders that the results of Phase 1 will be made available by NAN to INAC by July 15th, 2017. This tribunal further orders that in accordance with paragraph 4 of the terms of reference, and I'll be going to the terms of reference in a minute, INAC will commit to a further update to the Barnes report using data from the 2016 census and any other relevant available data that NAN and INAC agree upon. And this tribunal further orders that INAC and NAN provide updates to the tribunal concerning the progress of data collection and analysis in relation to the terms of reference every 6 months from the date of this order, as long as the tribunal remains seized of this matter. This is a joint position by NAN and Canada. What I want to highlight, first of all, is that in the affidavit that I've directed your attention to at tab 13, you will see a Phase 1, Phase 2, and Phase 3 exercise being contemplated. What I won't do right now is take you through the mechanics of each step. I will simply outline as a summary form what's contemplated. It was made a matter of record before NAN became involved in these proceedings, and I believe it was the Commission that filed the Barnes report. It was made a matter of record some of the challenges faced by agencies in remote communities. It was made a matter of record by the introduction of the 2006 Barnes report. And that report, in essence, looked at 2 agencies, 2 NAN agencies in NAN territories, and the struggles and obstacles they face by virtue of distance in time, in terms of where they are and who they are. The author of that report, Mr. Barnes, as you can see, is part of the panel that's looking at this. What we realized is it represented actually the only evidentiary record. I'm not going to say exclusively, but it looks like it from our review of the lengthy record in this matter. It looked like the only robust information of any kind about the challenges faced in remote communities, as in studies or empirical information. So we took this approach, being the latecomer we are. We suggested, and it's now been accepted by Canada, that we update the Barnes report. That we update the report, in other words, we work with what we have. We fill the gaps. We use current data, current census data and the like, and create what will be the first actual remoteness quotient. What is the quotient? The quotient is an economic model. You will forgive me because as an undergrad economics student, I'm about to prove to my professors I've forgotten almost everything. A remoteness quotient is the downstream result. What the experts look for in the first place is what's called a remoteness coefficient. In other words, when a funding decision is made, it could be a Jordan's Principle funding decision in respect of mental health services in Ontario. When a funding decision is made, it may be determined that, I will use round numbers, that $50 million needs to be applied across the province. And historically what's occurred, with very minor adjustments, is the money is distributed in accordance with something like population or some element of needs, none of which truly take into account in any detail, as the federal government admits, remoteness issues. What would happen now is an index would be created, an economic model would be created that would take into account the challenges and differences in costs and other challenges faced in the North. And it would result in an economic model that would create what is called a remoteness coefficient. That coefficient would be applied to the funds to generate what is known as a remoteness quotient. I trust if any of our experts are listening to me that they aren't too angry at how I've just described this, because I've summarized a far more complicated exercise. But the idea is obvious. We are going to index the funds. We are going to create equity. One size absolutely does not fit all. Phase one of this exercise is to take the Barnes report, the only actual data on the record here and frankly that exists right now out there. We're going to update it, and a report with a remoteness quotient will come back by July 15th, 2017. By the standards of the kinds of paces that proceedings have moved generally, with no criticism of anybody right now, that is actually pretty immediate, July 15th. It is intended to create a remoteness quotient in the immediate term, with flaws because it's not all expansive, and it's described as part of the phase one exercise. This will permit Canada to immediately start relying on true economic data for indexing funds. That is phase one. And that quotient is to be made available from NAN to INAC by July 15th, 2017. The next step contemplated, and it's referred to in the order, is to take the 2016 census data that I am told by our experts will be available very shortly this year. This is the long census data, long-form census data, and plug that in. In other words, raise the game on the data set. That will form phase two. You will see that at paragraph 5 of the order, it is contemplated that INAC is committing to a further update of the Barnes report using this data, the 2016 census data, and any other relevant available data that NAN and INAC agree upon. That's phase two. We will have gone a long way, in my respectful submission, to commencing this process of the creation of a remoteness quotient. What is then contemplated is a reporting exercise, and you'll see that at paragraph 6. I want to address that for a minute because I don't want to vary the order. In other words, I respectfully submit the order stands on its own. But I do have some supporting information I think will be useful to you. The parties have raised with me and Counsel for Canada that it would be beneficial after the July 15th data is available to return before this panel, or have a return date before this panel, on next steps in terms of adjustments to funding across the country that takes into account remoteness. We have picked a date of September 6th as a target return date. It is not a date expected to be full-blown arguments all day. It is a date expected to give us all a target to get organized on positions on what next steps should look like for the rest of the country. Canada's agreed to that, and really the intention is to give life to the direction in your September decision, in which you said, panel, that remoteness adjustments can start being made now. So the question then becomes, how do you dovetail this new remoteness quotient that comes out on July 15th with the remoteness adjustments that are supposed to be made on an ongoing basis? Counsel for both AFN and Caring Society have urged that we be sure to take these steps, because in essence NAN has taken on this responsibility of addressing the remoteness quotient issue. NAN is honored to help in that regard, and so we have no issue with keeping things moving. This isn't just supposed to be a NAN-centric exercise. This is supposed to be an exercise that recognizes the challenges for remote communities across the country. But what we believe is that we are in the midst of the development of an economic model robust enough to take into account the variables across the country. It's just a step-by-step process, that's all. So we've offered the September 6th date. We're obviously, I want to acknowledge for the record, this is the first time you're hearing it as a panel, so I understand that it would have been better if we would have done it before, but to be honest, it happened this morning in terms of the date. If September 6th isn't convenient, we'll find a date around that is appropriate for the panel, but we're offering the willingness to return because we've been asked to address that by other council. Concurrent with what I've just described, that is, concurrent with and as part of the exercise of the development of a remoteness quotient, is the establishment of a remoteness quotient table. I need acronyms everywhere in my life, so I call it the RQ table. This was the subject of public announcement on March 10th, 2017 by Grand Chief Fiddler of Nishnawbe Aski Nation and the Minister for Indigenous and Northern Affairs Canada, Minister Bennett, when they executed a terms of reference. The existence of the RQ table, the remoteness quotient table, was the subject of public announcement on March 10th, but the actual terms of reference were not released. And in fact, the first time they will be available as a matter of public record is once you have vetted this order and the attached schedule, and subject to your approval. Again, NAN wishes to make abundantly clear that it is hoped and intended that the panel hears NAN when we say that we believe your ongoing exercise of jurisdiction is the key to making this work. So we attach the terms of reference for the remoteness quotient table as part of the order, as a schedule. It is set out as the third page in the materials. And I understand that for some on the public record there would be benefit in my going through all 4 pages, but then that would make everybody else in the room suffer my line-by-liningness. So I'm going to do this in a general way, but make it clear for the record that we propose, subject to the panel's approval, to file this and make it available as a matter of public record. The terms of reference contemplate simply the following: that NAN in Canada will continue to work collaboratively on this exercise. While the terms of reference contemplate completion by March 31st of this year of that first phase 1, I can advise you we are right now actively working towards extending this. The RQ table is meant to go on and is a launching point for a collaborative exercise relying on the expertise of the individuals I've already talked about, and using that table to generate information which in turn can inform the work and orders of the panel. That's the whole point of it. So the RQ table has terms of reference that ended March 31st in contemplation of this hearing. But I can tell you what the vision is, and it's a shared vision with Canada. And I encourage the following view. It is quite true that the creation of a table with only NAN in Canada at it, some would say, obviously, well, then what about all the other tables? The tripartite table, as an example, that my friend Ms. Wente referred to. I want to be very clear. There is no intention of overriding the work of those tables. NAN has very unique perspectives and has suffered very unique burdens through its communities. It gives NAN an insight that this panel recognized in its March 2016 decision. NAN's responsible to work with the Government of Ontario in respect of the 1965 agreement and how to make it work for remote communities. So we say with respect that NAN is uniquely positioned to help on this. Does it always help to have many, many players at a table? Well, with all due respect to everyone in this room, no. Sometimes you move faster when you are lighter. Other times it's very important to consult broadly. So we say that the table makes sense as it's shaped, but you will notice there's a very express provision for consultation with others. And it's very important to keep in mind that this consultation process is directly reflected at page 3 under membership. Section 5, the parties to the table are NAN in Canada as represented by the delegates chosen by each party. Where appropriate, NAN and/or Canada may consult with other parties outside of this table on a confidential and without prejudice basis regarding issues discussed at the table. It is fully contemplated that the views of others will be solicited and then that this work will be offered up to integrate into other ongoing work. This is not meant to operate in a vacuum. This is not meant to operate as a silo. So subject to any questions the panel has, I think that's a sort of a full review.
This seems very organized and well thought of. Will you have a process for consultation? Will it be outlined? You just spoke about the fact that you would be open to consultation. So will there be a process clearly outlined, or?
The honest answer is no. We don't have a process outlined right now for consultation. So here's the issue. The issue is exactly what Ms. Wente talked about yesterday. You know, consultation can be a great thing. It can also be an out for action. In other words, you build something, you have to use it. So you build a complex consultation model, you have to use it. Well, how do you get a remoteness quotient by July 15th, as an example? This is just one example. That doesn't mean consultation is not important, Chair. I'm simply trying to allude to the fact that we believe this is first and foremost an empirical exercise. That once the numbers are generated by the experts, then absolutely the intention of the exercise is to then, I expect Canada will do it in its role across the country, and certainly NAN already started doing it in its informal discussions. But I want to emphasize that the problem with that word consultation is it by definition removes any notion of intermediate or immediate relief. It actually creates a labyrinth of communications that can slow us down. So I'm being honest when I say NAN will continue, and Grand Chief Fiddler and his deputies continue to make outreach to many communities, including Chiefs of Ontario. But, and I say the words but, if you're going to get a product, you've got to travel light at some point. Otherwise, you don't get the product. So right now, as matters speak, for the province of Ontario, I can give you an example. The only adjustments for remoteness that I know of in the province of Ontario is a 10% figure that is used as an arbitrary number in some arrangements that are made for funding and was applied in respect of immediate relief funding Canada recently issued. 10%, as a matter of common sense, grossly understates the challenges faced by remote communities. You need only walk into a northern store in Sandy Lake to see the difference in food prices. You need only look at fuel. You need only look at recruitment challenges, at construction costs, to know that 10% trivializes the barriers. So we need to fix this as a matter of economics fast. And I hope that answers your question.
I think you took it broader than I meant.
Okay.
I just wanted to, I was just responding to your comments that you said this is not in any way to exclude, consultations, or maybe that's not the word that you use, but I was just wondering if later you would have a process so that people are clear how they can bring up their views.
And the answer is, organizationally, there is not one now. But as an example, first of all, NAN would absolutely welcome suggestions by parties in this regard. But secondly, the September 6th return date actually is there so that we can come back together around the work product and share views. We're not restricted to just that September 6th return date. It was a very good suggestion made by Mr. Nawagabo for Assembly of First Nations. And in my mind, this idea of coming back to say, okay, well, how do we take this work now and make it help to further the order the panel's already made about adjustments for across the country for remote communities. So I'm hoping that that is our first step of being able to have those informal communications and get input, because that's the idea of the return date. Whether it's, by the way, whether it's September 6th or a date that is more convenient to the panel, the idea was to do two things by creating that date. Firstly, we have to create some distance between the July 15th report and Canada's ability to read the report and produce some useful information to us on what they're going to do with it. So I can't envisage saying to them, show up July 16th. It's not going to be useful to anybody. It happens to hit the dead center of the summer. That means the machinations of government are no different than the private sector. Things slow down. So we thought right after Labor Day would be logical. And it contemplates exactly what you just said, Chair. It contemplates this idea of communication.
Thank you.
All right, so subject to any other questions, I will move on then to the second area that I propose to canvass.